Hello, this is Bob Yantosca from the GEOS-Chem Support Team. Today I'm going to be showing you a couple of things about managing branches with the Superproject wrappers in the new GEOS-Chem 13. I'm going to assume that you've already watched the very excellent video by my colleague Melissa Soprizio about getting started with GEOS-Chem 13, so I won't replicate everything in that video. But there are a few things, a few subtleties regarding how branches work between the Superproject, whether it's GEOS-Chem Classic or GCHP or the HEMCO standalone wrapper, and the submodules, that is the GEOS-Chem Science Codebase or the HEMCO Codebase. So let's get started. I'm on the Amazon cloud, and I've already cloned a copy of the GCClassic wrapper repository. And as Melissa explained, this is a lightweight wrapper that encompasses both GEOS-Chem and HEMCO source codes. The GEOS-Chem code that we used to download is now a separate repository called it's the same repository, but we call it the GEOS-Chem Science Codebase. So, for example, if we go into GCClassic, and as you can see, there are a couple. We get a listing of GCClassic. There are a couple of unfulfilled links or broken links here. This means that we haven't loaded the submodules because these are actually pointing to directories in the submodules. So for example, if I do an ls of source/GEOS-Chem, you see there's nothing in that folder because we haven't updated the submodule. So I'm going to show you how to do that, and I know Melissa did as well. But first, what I want to do is to take a little detour, and we'll take a look at our Emacs window over here. So what I'm showing here, in the top window, this is the .bashrc folder, and this is the system startup file. So every time you open a new Unix window, you open a new Unix session in an Xterm window, the bashrc, or actually it's .bashrc, but I might call it bashrc for simplicity, but know that it has a dot in front of it. The .bashrc file will get executed. Now, usually it's good programming practice never to put your own customizations into the .bashrc file. You should always look to see if the .bashrc file loads another file. So in other words, you'll see an if statement, something like this, where basically in bash speak, this is saying if the file .bash_aliases exist in your home directory, then source it. In other words, apply all the changes, apply all the customizations that are in the .bash aliases file. So it's always good practice never to put anything into the bashrc file. So we will always add customizations into our bash aliases file. So I'm showing you here some useful commands that we are going to use in this tutorial. These are aliases, which means instead of typing the whole command, I can just type a shortcut of keystrokes and the command will be executed. So the first command here is to open a git GUI window. So we just type out git GUI. In bash, you type alias and the name of the alias with a equal sign and don't leave any space, and you put it in quotes, the alias text that you want to assign to this alias. So we just type git GUI. The ampersand means run it in the background. And this /dev null is basically our Unix convention for don't give me any warnings or errors. We call it our don't give me any of your sass back in Unix programming speak. So in case there are any graphical library errors or X11 errors or anything like that, you won't see it, which can be useful. The next alias, this GKA, will open a git K window so we can see the branches, and we can see all of our commits in the branches. This next alias, GSU, and I'll talk about that in a little bit, is git submodule update. So that's the command that we're going to run when we want to fill all these broken links. And also, if we change between branches, we have to run. If we change between branches in the Superproject, in the GCClassic wrapper, we also have to run git submodule update so that we point to the corresponding commits on the new branch in the submodules. And there are a couple of aliases here that show the commands to get the name of the commit messages. If you're in the GCClassic wrapper, if you type glog, it will give you the name and the git hash a shortened version of the Git hash of the most recent commit in the source GEOS-Chem folder. This -C source GEOS-Chem tells us to run the git command in this directory. So to use this, you have to be in the GCClassic top level folder. And in the hlog command does the same for the source HEMCO. It'll give you the commit message in the current top in the branch of in the top of the source HEMCO submodule. So those are useful aliases. I recommend that you pause the video and copy them. I'll also try to include them in the description of the YouTube video so you can plop them into your own bash aliases. But long story short, we should never add any customizations in bash RC, but make sure that your bash RC reads a file called bash aliases to get all those customizations. Okay, so now what we're going to do, because we have no code in the submodules updated, we're going to run our GSU alias, which is git submodule update init recursive. So the reason why I do these aliases is because we use them a lot, and it just really saves a lot of time. So as you can see, this is doing its magic. It's cloning the submodule code in the source GEOS-Chem. There's also some documentation that's a submodule, but we'll ignore that for now. And in HEMCO. And so now if we did from the GCClassic Superproject wrapper, if we do source GEOS-Chem, now we see that there's, oops, I hit the hot corner. We see that there is code in here, which is what we want. Okay, so let's clear the screen. So let's do a couple of things. So when we're in the GCClassic, we're in the top level of the GCClassic wrapper folder. We're going to run GKA, and that should open a git K window, so it'll let us see all the branches. And it takes a second on my internet here is a little bit slower connection when you're running on the cloud sometimes. Okay, and we'll minimize it so it doesn't. Oh, we will. There we go. So it doesn't take up the whole screen. And so as you can see here, so we're in the GCClassic Superproject wrapper, and on these green boxes here represent the branches. So this green box, a green box without orange around it, represents the local branches, and these are the remote branches. So these are the state of these branches at the remote repository. So as you can see, we're checked out onto a branch called main because the main word, the letters main, is bolded in this green box. That indicates the branch that we're checked out on. So, and if you look at the tags, you can see that the state of this code is at the state of the 13.0.0 release candidate, which is what we want. So now let's go to let's change the directory to source GEOS-Chem, and we'll do it. We'll open a git K window as well. We'll move this one up here, and we'll put the other one just below it. And again, we'll lower it so it doesn't take the whole screen. So as you can see, by the highlighted commit name, so we're on a commit called update year-end meteorology fields, etc., because this commit is highlighted. But as you can see here, none of these green boxes are bolded. It says we're on the state of the main branch, but we're not actually checked out into the main branch. So what's going on here? So whenever you run the git submodule update command to reposition the submodule code, what Git will do is it actually puts you in what's called a detached head state. And that means you're not actually checked out on a branch, you're checked out on a commit. So if in the GEOS-Chem, the source GEOS-Chem folder, if I type git branch, which should pull up a list of all the branch names, you can see that instead of saying we're not on the main branch, we're on this detached head. Now, at this point, if you want to run GEOS-Chem out of the box, never making any kind of modifications to the GEOS-Chem source code, this is perfectly fine. And the same for HEMCO. If you never want to make any changes to the HEMCO source code in the source/HEMCO folder, this is perfectly fine. However, if you're going to be a GEOS-Chem developer, if you're going to be adding your own modifications for research into the GEOS-Chem code, then you should be aware that you should not put any commits into a detached head state. In fact, Git will not let you do this. So if you need to add your own updates into GEOS-Chem for your own research updates, you should do that in a branch. And I will show you how you do this. There's a little subtlety involved here because we need to put branches in not only the GCClassic Superproject wrapper, but also the the GEOS-Chem submodule as well. So let's do that. Okay, so before we create a branch, let's look at our Git-K window. So this is the Git-K in the GCClassic Superproject folder, repository folder. And as we can see, we're on the main branch as we were. And then the Git-K window in the source GEOS-Chem folder. And as you can see, we're still in detached head state because nothing is bolded here. Okay, so let's go back to, well, first of all, what we can do, we can make the branch on the source GEOS-Chem first and then make another tracking branch in the GCClassic. So the easiest way to make a branch is once you're in the GEOS-Chem wrapper, if you click on this commit so that it's highlighted, and you grab with your mouse and you drop down and you pick create new branch, and it'll say feature. You can now type a name for our branch. So I'm going to pick feature/bmy/updates. Now, the reason why I tried feature first is because we use the Git flow convention, whereas new features have a branch that begin with feature, bug fixes have a branch that begin with bug fix, development branches have a branch beginning with dev, and so forth. So that's why I pick feature. And then I like to put my own initials so that I can distinguish that from anyone else's branch. And so we can hit create. Okay, so it creates the new branch. You see here's the local branch. And then to check out this branch, we're just going to click on it, right-click on it, and select check out this branch. Okay, so now this in the source GEOS-Chem folder, which is again the GEOS-Chem science code base, this is the place where we can add our updates. So let's add an update. So let's go to our Emacs window, and I'm going to type, I'll navigate to that folder. So I'm going to type video, which is the folder that I started in, GCClassic, and then source GEOS-Chem, and then we'll pick something in GEOS core, and then, I don't know, let's pick wet scav mod, the wet scavenging module. And the easiest thing that we can do to force a commit is just to add a new comment. So maybe just down here, I'll just type comment added for video tutorial on branching. And we'll save it. And if we go back to the Git-K window in the source GEOS-Chem submodule, and we're going to hit reload, Shift F5, you'll see that now there's an uncommitted change. So we have to commit that change to the repository. And if we click on it in the Git-K window, you'll see the exact change that we added. So let's go to our Xterm window, and we'll type GUI for the Git GUI, and wait a minute for that pop up. And here we go. And so I'm going to click on this to send it from unstaged changes to staged changes, and we'll add a commit message. Add commit for video tutorial. New comment in wetscav mod.f90. And we can type a message like, this is just for demo purposes for the tutorial on branching. And then I'll sign off, which just puts my name and email, and we'll click on commit. And so we've now committed that to the source GEOS-Chem science code base repository, our local copy of the repository. We haven't sent this back to GitHub yet. So now again, if I go to the Git-K window, I go down to reload, Shift F5, or with the mouse, and you can see that the our commit that we just made is now one commit higher in the Git history than what was on the main branch. So now our commit is ready in the feature BMY updates branch. However, there's a further step that we have to do. So if we go to the Git-K window in the GCClassic Superproject repository, and then we reload or Shift F5, you'll see that it says local uncommitted changes not checked into index. And if we go to it, it says the changes are in the source GEOS-Chem repository, and you can see the commit name. It says add commit for video tutorial. This is the commit that we just made. This is a commit from this was the old commit, the hash mark for the old commit. This is the hash for the new commit. So it means that a commit was not made in GCClassic. It was made in the source GEOS-Chem repository. So we need to, for the GCClassic repository to be able to point to the commit that we just made, this commit on the feature BMY updates branch in the source GEOS-Chem repository, we need to make a commit of itself. But again, we don't want to put that on the main branch because this refers to the stable current version, right? And if it's always good to have the stable current version available, because if you're testing something and you have to revert back to the clean version as it was at checkout of when the version was released, you can just switch back to the main branch, and that's the last stable version. So what we need to do is essentially make another branch in the GCClassic Super repository folder. So first of all, I'm going to click on this commit, so make sure that this commit corresponding to main is highlighted. Then I'm going to drop down and say create new branch. And then we're going to, again, we'll give it the same name. So feature BMY updates. So that creates a branch on the GCClassic repository of the same name as the branch that we just added in the GEOS-Chem Science Codebase folder. Now I'm going to check out this branch we will just click on it, right click on it and pick check out this branch. So now that's bolded. So that's the branch has checked out. And now going back to our X terminal window, I'm going to go up 2 levels. So we're in the GCClassic folder again, because remember we were in source GEOS-Chem. So now to get back to GCClassic, we have to go up 2 directory levels. Then I'm going to start the Git GUI window. So we get a Git GUI window in the GCClassic Superproject folder. And after a brief pause where I had to reset a couple of things, I'm back. And I now have a Git GUI window in the GCClassic repository folder. And as you can see, this is telling us that there's not a physical modification of the GCClassic repository files. Like we didn't modify the README file, or we didn't modify any of the make files or the CMake list or anything like that. But what the modification is, it's in the source GEOS-Chem submodule. So in order for the commit on the current branch, in order for the GCClassic repository to point to the updated commit in the GEOS-Chem submodule, we have to make a commit into the GCClassic submodule. So where it says source GEOS-Chem and unstaged changes, I'm going to click on that and move it to stage changes. But before I go any further, I'm going to go back to my Xterm window, and I'm going to run that glog command that I've talked about earlier in the video, the glog aliases. So if I type glog1-1, now this tells us, this is going to give us the name of the commit in the source GEOS-Chem repository along with the little git hash here. So I'm just going to grab this with the mouse and bring it into the Git GUI window because it makes for good documentation. And then I'll go back to the Git GUI window. Okay, and then what I like to do is just delete all this stuff after the hash and before the name. And then I write a commit message. I have a specific format for GEOS-Chem submodule updates. So what I usually do in making a commit of this type is type GEOS-Chem submod update add commit for video tutorial. And usually the commit name I type here has something to do with the commit here. You can abbreviate it for space. If there are a couple of commits that you're adding, you can summarize them as best you can. But it's good practice. I always like to include the git commit hash and the name of every commit in the GEOS-Chem repository submodule, because then that lets us know when we look at the code and see what was added. We have an explicit update. We say, well, this commit in the GCClassic wrapper is telling us to pull this commit or these commits in the GEOS-Chem submodule and so forth. So then I also like to type a message of this type. Actually, what I like to type is this commit informs the GCClassic Superproject about the following commits that were, I can't type today, made to the source GEOS-Chem submodule. And you list the commits, as I said, and then I just sign off and I commit. And so if I go to the GCClassic folder and I reload it, now it says GEOS-Chem submod update add commit for video tutorial. Okay, so now we're at the point where we have, first of all, we've made a commit into the GEOS-Chem science code base. So this is where you're going to be adding your research updates for GEOS-Chem. But we've also made a corresponding commit into the GCClassic repository. So if I type now glog1, we see it's pointing to the right commit. So let's just one more time go through the process of switching branches. You always want to switch branches on the GCClassic wrapper or the GCClassic Superproject wrapper. So let me clear the screen. And if you're confused about which branch you're on, you can also always type git branch, or you can look at it in the git k window. It'll say feature BMY updates. Okay, so we know we're on the feature BMY updates branch. Okay, so let's type git checkout main. And if I hit return, you see it says main source GEOS-Chem, modified source GEOS-Chem, switch branch to main. Your branch is up to date with origin main. Now, I like to look at these things, the branches in the git k window. So if we go back to the GCClassic wrapper, again, we're on the main branch, but the main branch still thinks, even though we switched to the main branch, it still thinks that we're pointing to featured BMY updates, right? Because it's pointing to this commit that's not in the main branch. So what we have to do is go back to our X terminal window and type GSU, which runs the git submodule update. Sorry, then if we go to the GCClassic directory and we reload the git k window, now we're pointing to the main branch. So now if we go to the GEOS-Chem if we go to the GEOS-Chem directory, again, note we're in detached head state, because every time we run the git submodule update, it puts us into detached head state. So what you want to do is to check out the branch main. Now, normally you shouldn't never put code into main, but if you want to, you can check out the branch main. That way you can see if there have been any upstream updates that you need to pull into the main branch, like a new version or whatever. And one more time, we'll switch between main and feature BMY updates. So we'll clear the screen. So I'll type git checkout feature BMY updates. And again, it says modified source GEOS-Chem. So if I go to the git k window, the GCClassic window in the git k browser, and again, it says we're in feature BMY updates. But if I click on this local uncommitted changes, it says we don't have we don't have a commit that we should have because it's listed in red. So then what we have to do is do git. We can do one of two things. If you want, we can do git submodule update, which checks the proper commit out. And as you can see there, we're pointing to the right commit. But as I said again, this leaves us in detached head state, so you can check out the branch. You can also probably just go into the git K window and manually check out the branch, and that'll do the same thing. So again, always check out branches from the GCClassic super repository. And anytime you run git submodule update, remember, it's going to put you in detached head state. So you're going to have to check out a branch before you add your own commits into it. So that's about it that I wanted to show you. There's a lot of new things to learn about submodules and how Git handles them. But with time, you'll get used to it like we did. So this is Bob Yantosca for the GEOS-Chem Support Team, and we'll see you in the next video.